3, start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Ramadan. I'm a senior project coordinator with the City of Minneapolis, CPED, in residential and real estate development, commonly called single-family housing, which we specialize in housing from 1 to 20 units. Today, we're going to be doing a question and answer session about our latest Minneapolis Homes Request for Proposals RFP for Minneapolis Homes Financing, and also to talk about our city-owned property purchase. Joining me will be Tara Thompson, another one of our senior project coordinators, and also Kevin Canase, the supervisor for our Minneapolis Homes programs. See, I'm not doing the advancement. Okay, I think we can move to the next screen.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tara Thompson, and I am the senior project coordinator on our CPED residential and real estate team. Thank you for joining our question and answer session for the Minneapolis Homes Financing Program, Notice of Funding Availability and Application for City-Owned Structures for Vacant Rehabs. Today, we'll be recording our presentation and posting it on the city's webpage, along with training slides and responses to questions asked. Questions can be asked via the chat and then will be answered at the end of the presentation. So today we'll be covering the goals of our application, the application amounts and options, including purchasing city-owned property without subsidy and requesting subsidy for home ownership development projects through Minneapolis Homes Financing. We will also talk about what you need to apply, property options, and more details about the program pathways. Next slide, please. Applications will be reviewed against current city goals, including looking at projects that are cost-effective, meet local housing needs, including serving households below income restrictions, have equitable wealth building opportunities, including projects that partner with workforce development organizations, as well as projects that incorporate unique design features, such as providing access to households with disabilities. You can review our program guidelines for more detail about program goals. So in order to apply, you need to demonstrate a few things. First, that you have the ability to pay for the project. Usually applicants submit a pre-approval or pre-qualification letter from a bank or a lender. Second, that you or someone who is working with you has recent experience doing a similar project. If you don't have experience, you can partner with a licensed general contractor, a developer, or hire a consultant to advise you on your project. In addition, DTAP participants may have the opportunity to obtain technical assistance through experienced developers who've worked with the city prior or presently, and get access and guidance in terms of how to move forward with the application or next steps when you've been awarded. Third, we want to know that you're responsible. So if you own a lot of vacant buildings, properties with rental license violations, or tax delinquent properties, this program is not for you at this time. In addition, if you have existing contracts or agreements with the city, we do expect that you are performing in accordance with our agreement. Next slide, please. So in terms of the application options, an applicant can apply to purchase city-owned property without subsidy for ownership or rental development. Or you can also apply if you're intending to do home ownership development for financing to city-owned property or privately owned property through Minneapolis Homes Financing to develop the vacant rehab structures that are available. Financing is available for home ownership units, restricted strictly to 80% AMI households and below. Through either program pathway, we have a goal to provide affordable housing. In order to apply for funding, you need to complete the application document. It includes a checklist of items that you must submit in order to have a complete application packet. You need to show us that you have construction financing. If you're applying for funding from the city, then our funding fills the gap. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. You will also need a completed offer to purchase or some form showing documentation of site control for privately owned structures. A complete city pro forma is required for home ownership, or a cash flow document is required if you're applying for rental projects. Construction plans don't need to have full architectural drawings at this time, but we are asking for preliminary sketches to get an understanding of what your plan and vision for the property that you're applying for is. Finally, a document to support the value, such as a broker's price opinion, appraisal, or a competitive market analysis, is also required. Next slide, please. So the city has right now a total of 14 city-owned vacant structures available for purchase. To purchase a city-owned structure, you must submit the offer to purchase along with your application. Prices are listed here as well as on our webpage. And now I'll hand it over to Matthew.
I was trying to multitask. Somebody asked a question, and we'll post it in the chat about when will the next round of second looks be. And if you're in this meeting today and you plan to move forward, or even if you're not in the meeting, we will send out an email asking if you're, or you can send us an email with the property that you're interested in purchasing. So let me send that, and then I'll get started. How did I do this?
Matthew,
Okay.
I'll respond if you want to just proceed with a presentation.
Okay, let's move forward. Again, I'm Matthew Ramadan. We're going to be talking about the city-owned property sale, and this is again for our 14 properties that we had advertised on the website. You can apply either to fix and rehab them and hold as the rental units, fix and rehab and sell them without city assistance, or fix, rehab and sell with city assistance through the Minneapolis Homes Financing Program. Next slide, please. This program for our vacant housing rehab offers a pathway for acquisition of city-owned vacant property. It's usually the easiest way to be, as a new developer, to get started, because you have, a foundation, you have four walls, and you most often have a roof. You've got something to start with rather than starting from scratch and coming up with new designs and plans and going through the development review process. One of the great things about this program is that also, unlike anything else you'll be working with the city of Minneapolis, through the Minneapolis Homes Program, through our vacant buildings, we waive what's called the construction code services and code compliance requirement for any of the properties that have to be fixed up in the city that are vacant and boarded. So it's waived through our Minneapolis Homes Program. Even if you don't request financing, you can still get started by showing that you have developed a complete scope of work that meets or exceeds what would be found in our code compliance format. As we point out, gap funding subsidy can also be provided by the city, again, for home ownership only, and if there's a proven need for the gap funding. It's not automatic. But if you've shown that your costs for rehab, say for instance, exceed your the value of the property after you've completed it for the area, or the home buyers that you're targeting cannot afford the property after you completed it, those are the two paths or avenues that you can then look at for receiving gap subsidy financing. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are fewer compliance requirements to maximize the access. Ownership does require certification of the household income of the end buyer, and rental requires that the units, if it's a owner, we usually say 20% because we're talking about higher number of units. But in a case where you're dealing with either a single family or a duplex, in a single family, that unit would have to be affordable to households making 60% AMI or less. If it's a duplex, at least one of those units would have to be affordable. Next slide, please. We wanted to share with you some project examples of housing that's been done by folks that may come from one of the different priorities that you set for yourself, either as people who are interested in rehabbing a house because they want to own it for themselves, people who want to rehab and then sell exclusively to home buyers, or people who want to hold on to rental properties. So this first example at 4236 Snelling Avenue was a person, a young BIPOC woman who wanted to live in her home, to rehab and then live in the home. So she bought this 2-bedroom, 1-bath house from Minneapolis Homes to Rehab without financing, and converted it. Had an experienced general contractor who knew how to rehab houses, and that general contractor basically reinforced the basement foundation and popped the roof off and turned it into a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home that she now occupies. Next slide, please. This one was done by a first-time redeveloper home developers at 1131 James. In this case, they had identified a potential 80% AMI home buyer, but they put in all of the effort and work. Again, this was without financing. Did a total gut rehab. As you can see, they reoriented the front, added decks on the front and the back, redid the garage, and in fact, they didn't move any walls, but they did such an extensive rehab that plan review, development review thought it was a new construction, and they were able to successfully complete this within a 12-month time frame and sell to the 80% AMI home buyer. Next slide, please. Now, a lot of you were out the last couple of weeks ago on November the 30th and December the 2nd, looking at the houses, and you saw situations like this. I'm afraid that a lot of people, when they came to this, they saw low prices and they thought these were move-in ready. As you can see, our houses are not move-in ready. If you were one of the many people that came out for the open house, mandatory open house inspections. But this is an example of a project that we wanted to share with you, because one of the things that oftentimes as new developers you don't think about is that this may be a pathway to bigger and better things. This particular property was acquired in 2015 at a time when people were passing on some of our vacant homes, and nobody was interested in buying them. And this developer bought this property along with 9 other properties for $1 each, and put all their own money into this process of redeveloping these 10 properties. They ended up fixing and selling to as affordable home ownership, but using all of their own resources, and were able to clear close to $50,000 per home at that time. And because they had done this successfully, the city was so impressed with their work that they offered them the opportunity to do. These are all in North Minneapolis, these properties. They offered them to do another project in South Minneapolis. Next slide, please. This was at 4640 Portland Avenue, and this was before we had restrictions on sale prices. The Minneapolis Home Program now has restrictions on sale prices, and also says that outside of North Minneapolis, if you're redeveloping a city-owned property, it has to have permanent affordable home ownership attached to it, so that people cannot fix and flip houses for exorbitant prices. But in this case, that this developer did the same thing where they purchased the home with their own resources. Was about $85,000 at that time, and which was high at that time in 2016. They put another $200,000 into it, totally stripped off the exterior, added a second floor to it, hardwood bamboo floors. I mean, it's beautiful inside out when you see this home. And ended up selling this property for close to $500,000. So they made a profit of almost $250,000 from what they had invested in this property. And again, this particular developer, as we talk about an entryway to become a developer, now buys single family lots and other lots in the city of Minneapolis, has a design in which they build and develop from new construction 4 to 6 unit apartment buildings that they hold as rental properties. And this is exactly what the city would like to see. We'd like to see higher density, but we don't want to see rentals that are single family if we can help it, because that tends to bring down the values in our communities. We much prefer to see rentals where they're 4 or 5 units or greater. And this particular developer now specializes in doing these kinds of developments in the city of Minneapolis. Next slide, please. However, for those of you who are interested in becoming a rental property owner, we do have at least 2 or 3 structures in our current portfolio that are set up and designed as duplexes. In this particular case, this developer purchased this duplex at 2732 4th Street North. They totally converted it, totally rehabbed it, and added another unit in the attic to make each unit is 3 bedrooms and 2 baths on the first level and the second level, and then they have a 2-bedroom, 1 bath in the attic space. And they've held this property as a rental property. So for those of you who are interested in this, it is allowable in our program. Again, with our city-owned property, all applicants must comply with the applicable ordinances. We do also have a unified housing policy, and we talked about earlier for ownership when you're looking at higher density, because we do know that there are other folks out there who may be interested in fixing and rehabbing their own property, something that is not a city-owned property. And again, they can do up 1 to 20 units with city subsidy if they're doing ownership, and without city subsidy if they're doing rental. In those cases, if you own a 1 to 20 unit building that, say for instance, is vacant or needs rehab, needs repair, and you're planning to sell the units, maybe as we call condo the units out, you would have to sell at least 10% of the units as affordable to 80% AMI. If you're planning to hold them as a rental, there is no city subsidy in those cases, but again, you'll still have to comply with the city's unified housing policy, that 20% of those units, if you have 10 units, 2 units of that 10-unit building will have to be affordable. So that's just something to be aware of, even if you're not receiving subsidy. And again, for our city-owned properties, we do expect you to collect, the certification of the properties showing that the people have met with the qualifications. For our city-owned properties, the criteria that we look for is, first of all, the end use of the property. Owner occupancy by purchase is one of the highest ratings that we give as far as we rank. So you guys, we got 61 people on this list. We had over 138 people come out and look at the houses. We have 14 structures, so we may get more than one offer on a structure. Just to be aware that some of you who are like on the fence of whether or not you should apply, in our last round, we had 10 houses, and we had, at the end of the day, and back in March, we had 4 houses that did not receive a single offer. So if you're kind of on the fence, kind of, scared of what should I do, what should I do, what should I do? If you put together a good proposal, there's always a chance that you might be the only one who decided to take a chance and move forward. But again, owner occupancy is the highest. Then a strategy for marketing that exclusively to owner occupants. If you're not planning to market owner occupants and you're not asking us for any money, then you have to still show us how you're going to rent these units out, hopefully for long-term affordability. And again, you're here today because you attended the open house inspection for our city-owned properties, or you have a property either owned or that you have a purchase offer on that you're planning to submit for Minneapolis Homes financing because you're going to create additional home ownership from privately owned units. Next slide. Here you can see some of the income limits and the rental limits for City of Minneapolis. Again, these are what, if again, you're looking to rehab and sell, or if you're looking to hold on to what you can charge as far as the rents, and again, what the household incomes have to be for the people that you're working with, for the number of people in the household. I think that one more slide, and I think that might be it. Next slide, please. Yep, that was it for me. And now we're switching back to Tara.
All right, thank you, Matthew, for your presentation. Next slide, please. So city funds pay for a portion of the project's costs based off of demonstrated need. Ownership projects have two types of funding, the project gap and affordability gap. Project gap is the difference between the total cost to build the home and its fair market value. Affordability gap is the difference between the value of the home and how much the home buyer can afford to pay. The rest of the project's cost is typically financed with permanent financing, such as mortgage debt, cash invested by the owner or the developer, or funding from another affordable housing program or source. The full amount of assistance in the form of gap funding provided during construction is also forgiven upon sale to the home buyer. So that is not something that you will have to pay back once it's sold to a home buyer who is 80% EMI or under. Next slide, please. So shown here on this slide are the income, affordability, price, and subsidy limits. Affordable price is determined using assumptions from the Met Council to determine the mortgage value of an income eligible household and what they can afford. Your application needs to show that the affordable price is met either naturally through market conditions or by requesting affordability gap subsidy to help an income eligible home buyer afford the mortgage at the value, with city subsidy filling that affordability gap. The affordability gap combined with any project gap will need to be less than or equal to the maximum combined subsidy, which adjusts based on the number of bedrooms of the unit created. Income limits are based upon HUD assumptions and adjust based upon household size. So you can sell to any household size that's within that income limit. So for example, for a 3-bedroom home sold to an 80% AMI household, the affordable price is $500,000 with a max of $205,000 for the subsidy. The income limits listed in the first chart assumes that a household with a minimum of 1 person. Limits are updated annually, and the proportion of affordability gap and project gap within the project can change, but the total subsidy combined cannot change after council approval. So what that means is if you were awarded $200,000, you can, the affordability gap and project gap is shiftable based off of what your need is as you walk through the process to complete it. So for example, if you originally had $190,000 set aside for project gap and $10,000 set aside for affordability gap, but determined later on in the process that $195,000 is actually needed for project gap and $5,000 can be applicable for affordability gap, you can do that. You have the option to do that. However, that $200,000 that was awarded to you cannot change. So we cannot increase it. So that's something to be mindful of. Next slide, please. So in terms of development requirements, the Minneapolis Homes Financing Subsidy includes some development requirements that the project should achieve. All projects need to meet the Green Communities criteria, which includes things like utilizing Energy Star appliances and efficient lighting. New construction projects also need to meet the Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready requirements. And any additional compliance policies may also apply depending on the amount of the funding that has been awarded. We encourage you to review the program manual to learn more, and that's listed on our website. Next slide, please. In addition to the subsidy limits on the previous slides, we also have a sustainability certification incentive up to 20% of total development costs for ultra efficient homes. So in order to have access and be qualified for that sustainability certification, you need to meet all of the requirements of our Minneapolis Homes Financing Program. And you, again, can find that information on our website. We also encourage eligible applicants to apply for Community Housing Development Organization, CHODO, or a Community-Based Development Organization, CBDO certification. The city receives federal funds for housing development, and a subset of those funds are restricted to CHODO and CBDOs. So if you're approved, you may have access to funding restricted strictly to those certified entities. And now I'm going to be talking about home buyer and homeowner support models. My colleague, Ryan Nestigen, is the project coordinator, excuse me, for this particular aspect of Minneapolis Homes financing, but I will be presenting this information in his absence. Next slide, please. So general qualifications for home buyers. Any prospective home buyer needs to be at or below 80% area median income. And the applicant's income needs to meet the HUD Part 5 requirements. And you'll be able to access this information, this link, when we list this, post this on our website. There's also a minimum investment for a home buyer of up to $1,000. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. So in terms of setting sales price, you can do that under the 2 approved models that the city has right now. So we have that recapture model where the sales price is determined by the appraised value. And then the perpetually affordable housing model where the sales price must be at a minimum of 20% below the appraised value and can't exceed the price determined by the type of funding provided. And the prices determined are also listed on that link in this slide. Next slide, please. So with regard to the models for home buyers and what yes, developers would have the ability to do for recapture projects, that would be limited to city-owned property located in North Minneapolis. And for perpetually affordable housing projects, that is available not only to city-owned, but privately owned property throughout the entirety of Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis. Projects must also be enrolled in a city-approved PAH model. And if you do have an alternative model in mind, you can also submit that, and that will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. So with the recapture model, again, this will provide down payment assistance and closing cost assistance to the home buyer up to 15% of the sales price. Again, minimum provided to the home buyer must be $1,000. Developers must request recapture funding on the pro forma, so that needs to be stipulated on there. And the amount that is provided to the home buyer is needs-based and is also at a 0% deferred note. It's listed as 0% in terms of a deferred note and mortgage. And if the home is sold, that's when it would be paid back from the net proceeds. Next slide, please. And with the perpetually affordable model, the discount again is 20% more or more against that appraised value. So in exchange for the value discount, the property is enrolled into one of two equity sharing models that has been approved by the city. So first we have the City of Lakes Community Land Trust model, which is secured against a 99-year ground lease. And then 25% of the value increase goes to the home buyer upon sale. The second model that we have is the City of Minneapolis model, and this limits the value increase at 2% on an annual basis. And this is secured with a declaration of restrictive covenants to inform anyone who is looking at buying the property that it's under this model. Again, if you have an alternative model that you would like to have us review, you can certainly do that. In the past, we have seen cooperative models suggested. The affordability is also renewed upon each home sale. So a simple way to think about that is with perpetually affordable housing homes or projects, the affordability stays with that property, as opposed to recapture, the affordability is applied to the lender. I mean, applied to the borrower, I meant to say, excuse me. Next slide, please. So the city has qualified administrators that we've selected to facilitate the PAH process. So we have Build Wealth and we have City of Lakes Community Land Trust. There are administrative fees to contract with your selected qualified administrator. You can also find this information on our website as well. What we also advise is during the process of you applying, it is helpful to reach out to each of those administrators to get a sense of what all will be needed, and if that particular model or administrator is a good fit for you. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, The application packets are due Tuesday, January 16th at 4 p.m. We are asking that you submit to our email, which is mplshomes@minneapolismn.gov. Proposals that have been approved will be submitted to neighborhood organizations for a 45-day review and comment period. Please also be advised that you may be asked to present to the neighborhood organizations to present your plans at the neighborhood meeting for more clarity and information to that particular group. We expect to present our recommendations to City Council within the second quarter of next year. And once everything has been approved by the City Council and the mayor, then we can move forward with the purchasing of the property and contracts. When you are finalizing the process for purchasing, please remember to have your good faith deposit ready to be provided. And this is usually 10% of the purchase price or $2,000. And units will be available starting in 2024. And next slide. With that, if you have any questions that haven't been answered yet, we will take those questions and answer those to the best of our ability at this time. But as a reminder, if you do have questions, you can also reach out to us directly. If you have questions about city-owned the vacant structures that are city-owned, you can reach out to Matthew. If you have questions about the financing, you can reach out to myself. So yes, thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Matthew and Tara. I think how we're going to go through these questions is we received a number of questions that were published in the chat and then responded to. But I want to make sure that we are also speaking to some of those questions. And so we will go through those and I'll try to kind of collate them so that they're organized together. And then if you do have additional questions that come up, please feel free to type them in the chat and we'll go through them as we're answering questions. So the first question that was asked was if this presentation will be available. Tara, can you answer that question?
Yes, it will be available. We will provide the recording as well as post the presentation itself to our website so that you can review and go through at a self-paced pace, essentially.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah.
Matthew, this one's for you. When will the second round of property walkthroughs take place, and what should folks do that inspected the homes in first inspections? Should they reach out to you, or are you planning to reach out to them directly?
Well, absolutely, they should reach out to us. And now that they've gone through the first round of open house inspections and have got an idea of which properties they may have an interest in, a lot of people just said everything in the first round. We know they're not going to apply for everything, nor can they expect to get everything. But if they've got one or two properties or maybe even three properties that they're really serious about trying to pursue, send me an email with your interest in those properties, and we will get back with you with open house dates that you'll have a day-long time to work with your general contractor or yourself if you have those skill sets to inspect those properties and develop your complete scope of work.
Thank you, Matthew. So the next question we received, and I can field this one, is there was a couple questions that came in about working with folks in a partnership or that have experience, but that may not be a general contractor, or folks that are general contractors that are leading the development themselves. So if you're working with somebody that is not a general contractor but that has experience, that is completely acceptable. Just Please bear in mind that if you're requesting financing or if you are planning on doing rehabilitation, you will need to be working with a licensed general contractor when you're pulling permits and doing construction. So it's not a do-it-yourself type of rehab. And so if you are getting financing from us, that requires that you go through a bid process. And if you're a general contractor performing the work, and you're receiving financing, we still do require you to do a bid process, which typically would mean that you're bidding out for the subs on the project.
Kevin, can I add a little more to that?
Please do.
Yeah, we really do not encourage do-it-yourselfers. So even if you're planning to live in the house yourself, which in many cases the city would allow you to do this work yourself, we have a time frame that is from the time of closing that we expect the house to be, completed with a certificate of occupancy within 12 months, and many do-it-yourselfers cannot meet that time frame. So we really do look for to come forward with experienced people who've done a program like this in the last 2 years, have completed something similar to what you're proposing in the last 2 years.
And then I would just add, if you're planning on doing it yourself, you will definitely want to engage with us. As Matthew shared, that typically scores less competitively when we're looking at offers that are received because of the risks and concerns that come along with that. So please reach out to us directly if you're planning to submit an application for doing it yourself. A couple questions came in about subsidy for rental and if that exists. Matthew, can you respond to that question?
Unfortunately, in this particular round, the subsidy for rental is not available. And so if you're looking to purchase a city-owned property or you have your own property and you're looking to get assistance in rehabbing it, rental would not be covered in either case.
And the city does have some different rental property ownership programs that are administered through our colleagues in our multifamily division. And I would encourage you to visit the city's website and search for rental property ownership. There are a number of other programs that exist. And if you're looking at doing rental programs for affordable rental, those programs would be more closely aligned. And then there was a question about the developer fee or profit. Tara, can you respond to that question? And to be clear, the question is, can developers charge a developer fee or how do they earn profit on their project?
Yes, developers can apply a developer fee to the project. That is kind of fleshed out in the pro forma that you will need to submit in your application docket. And that also has a limited percentage of the total cost, total development cost associated with your project. But yes, you are able to, in a nutshell, charge for your services, but that needs to be outlined on the pro forma.
Thank you, Tara. There was a question about the max amount of subsidy that's available, and as Tara framed in the presentation, the subsidy varies based on the number of units that you're rehabbing for affordable ownership, and then also the income of the household that you're intending to serve. So you would want to visit that subsidy limit chart.
Yeah.
And then there was, oh, I'm sorry, please go.
No, you're exactly right. Just using that chart as a guide to kind of keep you within the parameters for the vision that you have for the project that you are applying to do. That's it.
And then there's a question that says, do you have to submit the request for recapture funds to the city of Minneapolis 10 days prior to the application submission, in addition to listing it on your pro forma? And I think this is coming from someone that's worked with us in the past. So Tara, do you want to explain how our funding works and how it works on a reimbursement basis so that people are aware of that process?
Okay, so once you are, once the council approves, you will go through the process of finalizing your property purchase, as well as going through the contracts phase. Once the contracts are signed for financing, this is when you're able to start the construction process. So when the construction process has been approved, you can ask for funds to be dispersed to you. You will need to also work with your assigned construction manager, who will evaluate your request based off of the items that you provide as it pertains to labor and materials, the cost associated with that. And then our project coordinator will, once that's approved, move forward and be able to process your disbursement in a nutshell.
Can I add a little more? I want to speak really to our new folks who have never worked with the city of Minneapolis before, but may be interested in becoming new developers. If you're interested in working with the city of Minneapolis and you're asking for financing, be prepared for paperwork. When you're asking for financing, mostly they're federal dollars that we'll be providing to assist you as the developer with the project gap financing, or to assist that end buyer with the affordability gap financing. And because of that subsidy assistance, there's a lot more paperwork. So if you were a person who fixes and sold houses with your own dollars and you turn your profit if it made sense, once you ask for the subsidy, there is a lot more paperwork to deal with. Don't be afraid of it. It's something that it might be new to you. So like I said, we've had a lot of people who been fixing and selling houses for years, but they never got subsidy, and they didn't realize that now with the subsidy, there's more paperwork. There's compliance issues for civil rights issues, for fair housing. There's compliance issues for Section 3, hiring low to moderate income people from our communities. So most of the compliance issues are issues related to the funds, that federal dollars that are being put into these projects are then benefiting more people in the community than just the developer. So be considerate of that, but don't be afraid of it. And that's all I have to add to that.
Thank you both. Matthew, there was a question. If a person rents a one-bedroom place to someone, how does the specific affordability requirements apply?
Basically, if they're renting,
yes, a question
even
about
though
the unified
even though there's no
policy.
subsidy, if there's no subsidy, but they're planning to like fix up their unit and then rent out a one-bedroom place, they still would need. Wait a minute. Don't say this wrong.
You're correct.
They still would need to meet the unified housing codes. So even though they're not getting subsidy, the unified housing says that that for rentals, 20% of the units must be affordable. You've got basically a one-bedroom place, or I don't know how many units, but at least 20% of those units would have to be affordable.
Correct. Thank you. So then there was a scenario type of question. So Tara, I'm gonna read this to you, and if it's too much to think through on the spot, let me know and I can jump in. Okay. So someone looked at a home and got a comp or a comparison value from a realtor who said that home would be about $150,000, and they're anticipating $250,000 to actually rehab it. And then they're saying, how do I sell a $300,000 home for $185,000? So they're saying the value is $185,000 and their cost is $250,000. So the difference between that, or actually, I'm just going to simplify it. They're saying the value of the home is $185,000, but it cost them in total development cost $300,000 to rehabilitate it. So how do they sell that $300,000 costed home for $185,000?
So this sounds like a perfect opportunity for perpetually affordable housing. That's where you get those deeper subsidies. for the affordability gap and for the project gap, especially here in this instance. So you can take a look at our chart and see for that particular price point, also looking at the number of rooms, but also looking at what your options are in terms of the percentage AMI household that you would be able to serve. So if that falls in the category of, say, a 60% AMI household, and you're able to obtain, the gap, the difference that you need in order to construct this, that may be the route you may need to take, especially if you are looking at kind of limited funding or finances. So if you have, like, say, maybe the construction loan, and you're looking specifically at the city of Minneapolis to help solely with the project and affordability gap, that may be a next best option. If you have, though, additional resources, other entities that you could apply for additional subsidies, and that's approved, be sure to also incorporate that into your application, so that we understand the full scope of need for the gap that you're dealing with. But also, if you have additional funding, it may also give you the opportunity to look a little closer at the recapture model as well. I will add, though, that the perpetually affordable housing model is a model that can serve those lower income households. And so therefore, that we look at that during the evaluation process, after all of the applications have been submitted, in order to determine who we will award a particular project site to.
Thank you, Tara. And that question is basically asking, hey, if it costs more to build this house, how do I sell it for less? And the answer is, the city's Minneapolis Homes Financing Program provides our gap subsidy to address that market disparity, so that property can be redeveloped and sold for affordable homeownership goals. And so that's why we're providing the subsidy. And so our subsidy fills that difference within our program limit, so that that project is financially feasible. So let's take a look at our next question is about contractors. So Matthew, I'm going to actually have you respond to this. So the first part of the question is, if I'm a general contractor and I am working with subcontractors that are bidding on the work, can I collect a GC fee?
Okay, the short answer to that is yes. Even under the Minneapolis Homes Program, the GC fee is 8% of the total development cost, or as
the hard construction cost.
Hard construction cost, excuse me. If you're acting as both a general contractor and a developer, then it's a combination of those two, the 10% cap for developer and the 8%. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, if you're also acting as Minneapolis Homes developer, you need to be able to post all of your requirements for rehabbing the house, City of Minneapolis house. That would be so you almost have to compete against yourself in order to, if you're planning to be the GC and have those subcontractors, and all those subcontractors, as much as possible, should be able to meet affirmative action hiring goals for the program. So if you just got a set of people that you always work with, but you've never had to bid out the projects before, once you receive or approve for financing through Minneapolis Home Financing, everything does need to get bid out. Hope that's
And then
helpful.
a follow-up to that question, yes, that was helpful. The question is basically about how the bid process works, and how it's decided who does the work. And if you want me to field that, I can too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So whenever we're providing financing, we require a competitive bidding process, and that's to ensure that the funds are being used for costs that are reasonable. And you will have a construction management specialist that is assigned to your project that will review your bid advertisement and then also the bids that you received. And then you'll submit that as part of your closing package to us for your financing. And so we'll be reviewing the bids received to make sure that you're selecting the most responsible bidders that are the lowest responsible bidders. So there could be situations where you receive bids and you may need to evaluate them a little bit, but that's generally speaking how that works. And then there's a question about, is a competitive market analysis, broker's price opinion, or a appraisal required for a demolition project? Matthew, do you want to field that one?
For a demolition project, I got to think about that. So yes, we do require that those any one of those three options. So not all three, but the broker's price opinion, the comparative market analysis, or an appraisal for the end value of the property. So use, for example, the property at 2756 Queen Avenue North, which could be a tear down. You would need to have that broker's price opinion to show or reflect what the property would be worth after the tear down and new construction. So in that case, yes, and so that's one where we're considering a demolition. The same would be for 2818 Girard Avenue North. So one of those three options would be necessary, and this would be necessary for any Minneapolis Homes Finance project that we would need to see that broker's price opinion, or comparative market analysis or appraisal.
I've got another one for you, Matthew. Who pays for the assessments or outstanding bills against the property?
When it comes to the city of Minneapolis properties, you'll receive that property free and clear from all previous assessments or bills, including utility bills. If it's a privately owned property, that's something that the developer and the owner would need to resolve amongst themselves. But for city of Minneapolis, when you get a city of Minneapolis property, you receive it free and clear from all liens, assessments, and everything else.
Thank you. Tara, this next question is about perpetually affordable housing. Is PAH enrollment required for all rehabilitated homes?
No, it's not required. So if you're, say, for example, not getting financing, it doesn't need to be, it's not required. And you also do have the option of the other model, which is the recapture model. So no, you don't have to enroll in PAH.
Great, thank you. Another question for you about subsidy. If there's a point where the cost of rehabilitation increases and goes beyond the sources, including the subsidy provided, are there any other options by the developer to complete the project?
You know, we can't really say in terms of if there would be options available through the city. I would recommend that the best thing that you as a developer would be able to do is to, when you're getting, say, your initial bids for or your scope of work, to look at those figures probably as generously as you can within reason, to account for any cost increases that can incur during the construction of the property. So, you know, just planning for that circumstance to occur, I'm reflecting those costs on your pro forma so that because once the application is approved and submitted and approved for recommendation, 9 times out of 10, that may be the only amount of subsidy that we are able to provide via financing through Minneapolis Homes Financing. We cannot guarantee whether or not we would be able to assist. So as a developer, you will need, it would be important for you to plan for that circumstance for it to occur. Just based off how the market is behaving right now. Yeah.
So you assume the risk is what I'm hoping you're hearing from that answer, and doing your due diligence up front so that you're being mindful of costs and building in a little bit of capacity there if those costs increase, because our subsidy limits are our subsidy limits, and once we go to city council, it's not something where we can just easily bring additional subsidy to projects. The next question, Tara, is can you explain the recapture model in a little bit more detail? And I think just explaining how the down payment assistance loan works would probably help.
Okay, so with the recapture model, funds are provided for project gap, but as well as affordability gap. And let's see, affordability gap and project gap, and the affordability is with the borrower. So you would be providing that affordability to help the borrower or home buyer get into the home. And if that home buyer was to, say, decide to sell that property, they can sell the property, but it doesn't have to be affordable to the next person coming in and purchasing that property. But when they do sell that property, the funds that they were provided in terms of the affordability gap is expected to be paid back. That's not something as a developer, if you're not the owner occupant, that you would be responsible for. That's forgiven once everything's finalized with the purchase. But if you are in fact, say, the owner occupant, that is something that you would be expected to pay back as well. I hope that answers the question, or if you have a follow-up question for me to better understand your question, we can revisit as well.
And just to clarify there, because I'm not sure if I misheard you or not, but whenever we provide recapture assistance, that means that once the property is sold or no longer occupied by an income eligible household, that those funds would be repaid from the sale of that property. So if you're developing a recapture project and you sell it to an 80% AMI borrower and they no longer are living in the property, then those funds would be recaptured at the transaction for the sale of that property, if that makes sense. And then there's a question about the sustainability incentive applying to rehabs. So the sustainability incentive information typically that applies for new construction, and generally speaking, that is because the requirements for achieving that incentive, either passive home construction or net zero energy ready with solar on the roof, requires insulation and new windows and things like that in the walls that you may not be achieving if you're doing rehabilitation. So you'll need to make sure that your scope of work is considering that if you're applying for the incentive. The primary reason that that information was included in this presentation is that there are 2 properties that we are open to considering demolition for new construction. And if you're doing that and you're building a new construction property on that lot, you could possibly apply for the sustainability incentive. Matthew, the next one is for you. So if a duplex is sold, or actually, Tara, this one's for you, I apologize. If a duplex is sold after rehab to a affordable homeowner, does the home buyer have restrictions for renting out the other side of their duplex?
Well, that's a good question. If you're getting financing, funds are strictly applied to the homeowner's side and cannot be applied to the rental. So I think with that, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, I don't think there are any stipulations with who it needs to be rented to in terms of thinking about income limits, because we're.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was just going to say, you are correct. There are no limits. If you're only asking for funding for one of the two units, there are no limits that apply to that second unit. The thing you need to be aware of is our funding is provided, excuse me, only for that affordable unit. And so your subsidy that's available is effectively half of the cost of that development, because only one of the units is counting towards that total development cost. And then if you are planning on selling a 2-unit building to one household, we are going to have to consider the net rent as part of their income in determining their eligibility from an affordability perspective. And if that's something you're thinking about, it's probably best to connect with us directly so that we can walk through that with you. It might be a little bit of a challenge to do that in a Q&A session, but if you're thinking about doing that, please reach out. And then there's a question that says, based on the housing on this list, can you offer a safe, secured money amount to new developers to complete one of these homes? And the answer to that question is the money that would be made available would be through our competitive financing application process. Matthew, there's a question about the asking price of the property and if that's negotiable or if we're willing to modify that price.
The short answer is at the time of application, those numbers are set by an appraiser. So this is not a bidding process where you can offer more or less and hope to. So you would submit based upon the price as you see them advertised. Sometimes when situations arise, we may reduce the price afterwards, but we do not reduce the price prior to the applications being received. Hopefully I answered it.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, Tara, I think you answered this one already. I'm just going to repeat it. For recapture subsidy that's provided as a 0% interest deferred loan, that's a 30-year loan. There's a question specifically about how that's provided.
So it's provided during the application process for the home buyer. So that will be incorporated as a down payment figure based off of the discussion with the developer who's selling it to the home buyer. They will stipulate to the home buyer how much available subsidy in the form of affordability gap is available. And then that will be incorporated during the lending application process to make sure that, you know, all the numbers work. And then through that, you will be qualified, the home buyer will be qualified with their income. And you continue on with the lending process until it is finalized at closing. And then you will have those documents in the form of the mortgage and the note, as well as our affordability gap and mortgage that shows that shows the details of what that deferred loan is for your records. And that'll also be recorded by title as well.
Thank you. Tara, can you answer the question? There is a question on if we charge interest on the funding that we provide.
No, we do not. We do not charge interest on the funding, but something that you wanted to also keep in consideration as it relates to your cost, that needs to be stated on the pro forma is interest really that's associated if you obtain another form of lending that's building, either through a bank. We've seen hard money lenders. So you also want to incorporate what the total interest is going to be over the amount of time that you are able to pay that off, that construction loan off, get that construction loan paid off with the permanent mortgage.
Thank you. And let's see, there's some additional questions. I'm going to try to go through these. And there's kind of a specific question about how our financing is provided. And I think that one's best answered directly. So I'm just gonna, if I'm saying something's should be answered directly, we'll respond to you, but you can also reach out to MPLS Homes at Minneapolis MN, and we can schedule some time to connect with you as well. And there's a question on if they can include detailed design elements such as floor plans in their proposal.
Oh, yeah, of course, by all means, if you're able to obtain that and provide it during the process, and that gives us, better insights as to what you're wanting to do, that is all the way acceptable.
And please keep in mind, we just don't require full architectural drawings because of the cost that's incurred, realizing that this is an application and you're not guaranteed a property. So we want to limit your time and expense that would be associated with applying in case you are not awarded a property.
I want to share an experience that happened, just so you know. That house at 1131 James, new developers, first timers, even though they didn't change any structurally and the house didn't change any walls, add any bedrooms or anything, they did have an architect, against our advice, come in and do complete architectural drawings for that rehab house. And because of that, when they submitted their application for permitting, they submitted those drawings, and again, people at development review thought it was a new construction, and it held up the process for like 3 months because it was a rehab. You can get pretty much with Minneapolis Homes. You submit your permit, our construction management people look it over, and they submit the permit on your behalf, and it's a lot faster process than submitting those architectural drawings. So you might want to use them for your own edification, but for our program, please, it's not really worth it to do that.
Thank you, Matthew. Can you walk through the timeline a little bit?
Okay, timeline now. We're looking at within the next week or so having the second looks. We've been getting some emails now from folks in the last few minutes saying which houses they're interested in walking through. So in the next few weeks, we're going to have those second looks in which we'll have a day-long opening of those properties for you to go through with your qualified or experienced general contractor and develop that detailed scope of work. After that, and we will have everything from this session posted on the website. So hopefully with some of the questions that you may have that weren't given today. Then the next thing is the January 16th. I want to make sure I got that right. January 16th due date for all applications due. That's 4 o'clock on January the 16th. After that, depending on the number of applications we receive, but usually we have a review process where we do two things. We have an internal review, and then we also will invite interested parties who worked with us in the past for an external review. That may be another 45 to 60 days out. We anticipate going to city council if everything moves smoothly within 90 days from the time of the applications coming in. We submit that information to city council. We have 1 month before a city council meeting. So we're looking at spring of 2024 for getting those approvals and moving forward with the next step, which is then to begin with the redevelopment contracts. The redevelopment contracts usually come out about 30 days after the city council meeting, in which the awarded projects are given, or not given, but on which we have the information on which developers have been awarded the rights to acquire our projects. At that time, you'll get your redevelopment contract. You have about a week and a half or 2 weeks to get that information back into us. And if you're asking for subsidy, at that point, our construction management people will begin working with you to go through all of the steps necessary to get the final contracts, not just the redevelopment contract, but the final financing contracts completed before you can start your work. We mentioned earlier in the presentation about there's a bidding process that needs to take place in which you're bidding out all aspects of the project, showing that it does demonstrate affirmative not fair marketing, but affirmative action in the hiring process of both the general contractor and or those subs as well. So look to get started in the late spring with the construction, and then you have up to 12 months from the time that you close on your project to complete and have a certificate of occupancy. So to be done with it, you're looking at no later than the spring of 2025 that you're done with your project. You can obviously get it done earlier if you've got a general contractor who's done projects like this before at the city of Minneapolis, and they are working with an experienced developer who can help you walk through the process and maybe speed it up a little bit. But by spring of 2025, we expect all projects that are awarded in the coming months to be completed by then.
So if you want to hear what your contract will say, it'll say you have to close on financing or acquisition within 6 months, as Matthew framed. And then from that point, so then there's 12 months after that point where you have to complete construction and have final occupancy. So from council approval to completion, it's 18 months, which Matthew just framed. So then let's see what other questions we have in here. So it looks like there's a couple questions about the subsidy chart. So I think, Tara, let's just show that chart here again. And then at a high level, do you want to explain how this chart works so that people are aware?
Okay, so it's determined, the amount of subsidy that you can obtain is determined based off of the room size, the room amount. So from a studio to a 4+ bedroom unit. And it's also based on the AMI level. So 40%, 60%, 80% AMI specifically. So for example, if you are looking to construct, say, a 3-bedroom house at 60% AMI, the maximum affordable price would be $173,500, but the maximum subsidy, so this is both for affordability gap as well as the project gap, is $285,000. So that's for 60% AMI. So if you're applying for 60% AMI, you also need to think about that being a perpetually affordable home based off of the subsidy, based off of the household, the AMI that you're helping obtain ownership for. And then you can also look at the income limits below to help you determine what the total income, and this is for all individuals above the age of 18 that's living in the household. Their income will have to be taken into account. So combined, they would have to be under, say, at the 60% AMI for a household of 6, they would have to be $86,950 or under annually to be for this subsidy to be applicable.
Thank you, Tara. Matthew, there are a couple questions in here from folks that are looking to purchase and rehabilitate and live in themselves. Can you explain to them, just generally speaking, kind of how that works? And I think explaining sort of how our loans are provided if they're asking for subsidy versus private loans might be helpful too, just to explain that.
Okay, the first thing, if they're planning to live in the house themselves, everybody who ends up getting a Minneapolis Homes financed home, whether you're going to live in it yourself or you're planning to sell to owner occupants, the end owner occupant needs to, whether that's you or somebody else, needs to have gone through an approved City of Minneapolis home buyer counseling program. And you can find those on the Minneapolis Homes website under home buyer resources. So that you select someone from that list and then make sure you go through that approved training. That way, one of the things it'll do, it'll help you, first of all, determine how much house you can afford. And secondly, what am I trying to, I just dropped my, how much house you can afford. But secondly, if you're ready to purchase. And so you really need to know these two things. And that way, when you approach this program, when you approach us, say, I want to purchase this house to live in, that that you can then possibly go to a lender and get pre-approved for that amount. That amount may not be sufficient for the cost of acquisition and rehab, because then you would say, okay, this is the gap that's needed in order to make up the difference between what I can afford and what the house, for acquisition and rehab. If you're planning to be an owner occupant yourself as an applicant, you would not be eligible for the developer fee. However, you would be eligible for the gap financing and the affordability of the project gap and affordability gap financing. And I think, was that the question, or did I miss anything?
Yes, I think that was a good response. So thank you.
But the first thing is definitely go and get that, home buyer resources counseling training, and also talk to your lender and make sure that your lender is on board with how much they can provide. Mm-hmm. So our funding is secondary funding. It's not first source of funding. Our funding comes in as on a need basis after you've already determined how much your financing is available. And again, you cannot exceed 80% AMI. So if you're planning to purchase and live in a home, and your household income as an individual, say for instance, or two people, is higher than the allowable amounts that you see on the website, this program would not be for you.
Right. So this is again where the subsidy limits table comes into play, because then if you're looking at it and say you're hoping to acquire a property, develop it for yourself and your family, use this income limit sheet as a guide, because you already have some of the information in terms of knowing what your income for your entire household is going to be in terms of, in addition to the, the total amount of inhabitants in your home. So that would be able to tell you, okay, where you land in terms of the amount of possible subsidy, combined subsidy that you would be able to get, and you can use that information along with a pre-approval from a lender to help you determine what your actual gap in terms of subsidy request is going to be. when you submit your application.
Great, thank you both. There's a question about somebody owning a duplex and wanting to sell it for affordable homeownership. And there's also a question on if it can be converted. So the conversion question, and our program doesn't prevent you from doing that, but there's some requirements that would come along from that, from both getting a building permit and then underlying zoning, which you would need to confirm. But from a subsidy perspective, Tara, the question here is, would we provide subsidy if they are selling a property they own for affordable home ownership and they need funds to do the rehabilitation in order to sell it?
Yep, as long as the you are serving 80% and below, and it's going to, like you said, being sold to ownership, that is eligible for application.
And the one additional thing I would add is we do require that you market the property and that it is available for everyone. So it could not be a situation where you're doing that, charging a fee and then selling it to like a household member, for example. So if that's the type of situation you're considering, please talk to us to make sure that it's in compliance with the program, because we do have marketing and affirmative marketing requirements that come along with any financing and subsidy that we're providing.
I want to add another point though, because I thought I might have heard something about a conversion. So if the seller is looking at selling each of those units as home ownership, there are some requirements from construction code services that require plans showing how those units have been separated, that a duplex may where an owner occupies one and the other one is a rental may not be required. But if both units are going to be owner occupant, there is a need to show detailed plans for that, showing that the differentiation between the units, and that it meets certain code requirements.
Yes, thank you. And maybe to add to that too, there's a question on flexibility on drawings for rehab at application. So at application, we really just need rough sketches, and it's generally speaking to see what, if you're planning on moving walls or if you're like putting in a bathroom, it's more for those purposes, so that we know, one, how many bedrooms you're putting in and the type of rehabilitation you're doing, so we can evaluate your pro forma and the financing request to make sure that it's that, because we'll evaluate like that scope of work. So they don't need to be full architectural drawings, they can be just rough sketches, and that's completely acceptable. There's a question, we own a property and want to purchase the adjacent property and rehab it so that staff can live in it cheaply. Tara, do you want to field that question?
As long as it's being sold for ownership, you're definitely eligible to apply, but it needs to be, especially if you're requesting financing, it needs to be sold for ownership.
And if you're planning on doing rental, then you would just have to comply with the unified housing policy requirements, which is 20% of the units for 60% AMI households, but there would not be financing that's available, or financing is restricted to home ownership. Let me see if we're missing any other. Oh, Tara, here's a good question. Who determines the final appraised value of the home?
So once the home is so we have a appraiser who you would work with as a developer to get based off of your sketches and drawings and plans for the unit, help to determine what the final value is for that home. And that's what we use in terms of the value associated with that property.
Thank you. And there's an appraiser panel that's listed on our financing page. So if you're funded and you get to that point, you can use that panel to reach out to the appraisers. And it looks like that is the questions that we've received so far. So we'll give it another moment or two for any additional questions that come in. And in the interim, please feel free to reach out to Matthew and Tara with any additional questions that you have. And I realize I'm not sharing that screen anymore, so let me share their contact information. And otherwise, we wanted to say thank you for attending. And if you have additional questions that are specific to your situation, there were one or two folks, I think, that I said, please contact us and we'll discuss that individually. And I would recommend that you reach out to us to do that. And then in the interim, thank you. And then if you have those specific questions, you can also reach out to Matthew and Tara directly. And I'm just going to give it a couple more moments to see if anybody asks any additional questions, but so far I haven't seen anything else come in. So with that, thank you again for attending. We're hoping that this was informative and you were able to get your questions answered. As Tara and Matthew shared, this recording will be posted to our webpage. And please feel free to reach out to us as you're working through things. And if you have questions, I encourage you to reach out sooner than later, because if you have questions and they pop up and they impact what you're looking at doing, it's always best to do that sooner than waiting till the last minute. And then there was a great question here about staying in the loop about future properties. So if you go to www.minneapolishomes.org, that's our landing page for anything related to our programs. I'm going to publish that here in just 1 second. There's a newsletter you can sign up for, and that is how we send out notifications about any property opportunities that are available. After this RFP, we may be marketing vacant land and possibly financing for redeveloping that vacant land, depending on our budget in this RFP. And so please, if you're not, sign up for that newsletter. Matthew and Tara, anything to add before we close today?
Go ahead, Tara, you're first.
Oh, I just wanted to reiterate many thanks and gratitude for coming in, for all of those who came out and seemed very enthusiastic about the opportunities that we have available, and also for the new developers cutting their teeth on first-time projects. It was good to see. So I do hope that I see a lot of you who I saw and spoke to come in with those applications. Like we want you to contribute to the affordable housing units that are being created in the city, and starting the journey, the process of being in partnership with us to do that. So and as I mentioned to some of you, right now, just focus on the application, making sure that that is as sound as possible. And the next steps will be lit as you walk down that path. Try not to overthink the situation, because this is new and then you find yourself in paralysis and don't apply, because there have been individuals who have been very successful starting out in this phase of the Minneapolis Homes program, and have gone on to do major things and are performing developers with us. So please submit your applications. Make sure that they are fully fleshed out and financially feasible, and we're able to see the true vision that you have for that particular structure, vacant structure. And yeah, we wish you all the best, but thank you for your time and your attention and the vision that you have to develop the structures in Minneapolis.
And just to add to what Tara is saying, I really, really want to encourage you. I know we saw a lot of people out, but I really want to encourage you that, you could think long and think wrong and find out that you would have been the only person who applied for a property. So don't get paralysis analysis. Secondly, we have a lot of information on the website already, including the rehab scope of work. So as you're working with, if your general contractor, say for instance, is new to the program, but has done other rehabs, look at what we asked for them to, the detail of information that we asked for them to submit. Somebody might say, I'm just putting in a new floor. Another person says specifically that they're putting in, they're replacing the hardwood floors with new carpeting, or they're going to redo the hardwood floors and finish them and replace the parts that need to be repaired. Neighborhoods look at those things. Somebody comes along with vinyl flooring, sheet vinyl flooring. Another person's putting in something a little more quality. Remember that other people are going to be looking at this and judging. Are you going to put in something that's quality, not only just affordable but also quality? The types of finishes that you use is very, very important. So a lot of first-time folks don't get approved because they either were very light on on their details, or their product at the end of the day was not something that was sustainable as far as holding up for our families. So don't play our program cheap. The way to be successful is to do it well, do it right, and make sure that you've got as much detail as possible, that you respect the end buyer who's going to be living in that home, and you respect the communities in which you're going to be a developer.
And so a couple questions actually. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say a couple questions actually came in. Matthew, one question was if you have a timeline you're thinking for the second walkthroughs.
Yes, we mentioned that already, but within the next, let's see, today is the 14th. We expect those walkthroughs to be done within the next week or so. So we're looking at anywhere between now and about the 23rd. We don't want to have you guys out there on Christmas Eve. So between now and Christmas, we'll have those second walkthroughs. And we'll send those emails out with, those dates that they were going to be available for and let us know which properties you're interested in doing that walkthrough on. And we have received probably 5 or 6 emails already. So we'll get right back to you as soon as possible.
Great. And then there's a couple questions that came in related to financing. So just to clarify, our financing is gap financing. It is not a mortgage, and it is not the entirety of your construction loan. So if you're looking to purchase a property from us, you will need more than just $1,000 plus the good faith deposit. That is just the $1,000 that was referenced in the presentation was at the end when it's being sold to an affordable buyer and they are getting a mortgage to acquire that property. They have to provide at least $1,000 of their funds as a down payment to acquire the rehabilitated property, and then need to also qualify for a mortgage so that they can support that sales price. And then there's affordability gap that can come into that and additional details. But if you are an individual that is looking to buy one of these properties, you do need to qualify for a mortgage that is sufficient, that between that and the city's gap financing that we're providing, you can qualify to purchase that property and rehabilitate it. Our program is not a first mortgage program, and so you would need to qualify for first or primary financing. Hopefully that answers that question. And please feel free to reach out to us with any specific questions you have about your projects. We're excited to connect with you and hoping to see your application. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.